A grief and loss responsive community is one that is open to the idea of embracing compassion. Compassion is the willingness to sit with someone else's pain. Compassion often gets sort of misinterpreted as empathy. Empathy, which is where we often go, can actually be a little draining sometimes because it's trying to take the perspective of others and feel for them, as opposed to compassion, which is to feel with them. A couple things to really keep in mind when we're creating this compassionate workspace. One is that we don't compare. Grief isn't a comparison. Your loss is bigger than mine. That loss was, more important. It's not a comparison. Suffering is suffering. Loss is loss. We're not in a position to judge people's attachments. We're in a position to tend to them. That someone's relationship with a friend may be more valuable than their relationship with a sibling. Their relationship with a pet may be more soothing and emotionally supportive than their relationship with an uncle they see once a year. When people have had a loss, it's not necessarily a problem that needs solving. It's a feeling, it's an emotion that just needs to be tended to. And I think we do that by acknowledging it. Compassionately recognizing what is happening is really powerful. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem here that we need to fix. It might mean I just need to compassionately understand and recognize that somebody in my workspace is struggling. Grief is very complex and it's very personal. And I often, as a counselor of those who are grieving, try to keep the perspective of, it's like this for you. Secondly, the hallmark of a grief or a compassionate, responsive workplace really are three things: communication, collaboration, and care. Like, we might feel an urgency when we feel someone distressed. We might tend to speed up our thinking because we're starting to get a little anxious. We want everything to be okay. And actually, a helpful response is almost the opposite. Instead of us speeding ourselves up, how do we solve this problem? How do we take care of this? Is to take a breath and actually kind of slow down. We use a lot of scripts to help us navigate, and it might be like, I just saw him, he looked good. And we have a very limited image of what grief looks like. We often think of it as someone in agony and remorseful and painful and with terror on their face. And yes, that's part of it too. But the person who is sitting at their desk accomplishing tasks, that's part of it as well. Grief is really an inward experience and cuts across 5 different planes for people. There's a behavioral piece, a spiritual piece, cognitive, physical, and emotional. We just think of grief as being an emotional experience, but it impacts people physically. They have stomach aches, they have neck aches, they have pains in the back that can't be expressed. It affects people cognitively. They can't organize, they can't plan, they can't manage their time. It affects people behaviorally. They are either too much or not enough. They're sleeping all the time or they're never sleeping. They're always eating, they're never eating. It affects people spiritually. They start to question things. They don't feel safe. There's doubt that enters their mind. But when we think of grief as just emotional and just outwardly emotional, we might be misinterpreting grieving with mourning. And just because someone looks okay doesn't mean they're necessarily feeling okay. We have remarkable skills to protect ourselves, to put on our armor, to put on our coating, to help us get through a day. And that is productive and helpful. There's kind of 2 orientations. When we're grieving, there's loss orientation and restoration orientation. And most people go back and forth between the 2, where I'm focusing on my loss, I'm focusing on going forward. The way we often get fooled is when our fellow employees and coworkers say things like, I'm good. No, really, I'm good. And sometimes that might be, I'm good right now. And I often think of adding those 2 words to every sentence, right now. I'm really struggling right now. I feel great right now. Someone who's grieving can be very uncomfortable in a work environment, school environment, because people don't know what to say, and the range of emotional grief responses can be from sad and caring and compassionate to getting angry because somebody's not pulling their weight. I think as much as we're trying to validate the experience of the griever, we have to validate the experience of the employee who's uncomfortable with the griever, and and maybe this is more of a kind of strategy session of what are some little things we can do to increase comfort. I think so often we just want things to go away, but it's not that simple. If it was that simple, we would have done it already. What can we do today, or what can we do this morning to make the situation a little more comfortable? And the way we kind of move out of this is to move through it. We can't take shortcuts. We can't take angles. We just have to acknowledge in order to validate, normalize, and move forward.